You're watching this on YouTube. One of us is a pro football player. The other is not. I'll let you try to figure out which is which. Mike McGlinchey from the San Francisco 49ers. How are you,
I'm
my
doing really
friend?
well, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, can I ask you something? I mean, we're taping this a week after the Super Bowl. How long does it take your body to heal after a season?
It takes a few weeks. It depends on how bad you hit it afterwards as well. Everybody kind of saves up their steam to cut it loose a couple on vacation or with friends and family and all that kind of stuff. So, it's about a couple weeks and depending on how much you can still keep moving and training and working the kinks out, it varies depending on the year for sure.
See, I remember Eric Davis, old Niner, was telling me, he goes, it takes me 2 to 3 weeks after the season before it doesn't hurt to move. Right. And he played cornerback. Right. And he goes this way, he goes, there's always little nagging pains. There's always little stretches. There's always things. And one of the things he said, and I found this, he goes, you know what hurts most on pro football players? Our hands.
I agree. I agree with that. Your hands and your feet. And it's your leg, because you're so used to your legs always having to work and move and all that kind of stuff. And you're trained for that. But the more you get stepped on, the more your hands jam in helmets and face masks and all those kinds of things, the more it stays with you. Unfortunately, bruises take time to heal and fingers being screwed up and all that kind of stuff. But my job is to kind of hit people all day with my hands. So that definitely takes a while to get back and stop hurting.
Aren't you glad they kind of redid the face mask? I mean, you think about the face mask from the 70s and 80s, and they were cages, right? And there were little small bars. And Simon Fletcher, who played for the Broncos, he told me that you would get your fingers caught because you're just moving in a violent time in a violent space very quickly. And he goes, you get your fingers caught, you didn't realize it was caught. But now you guys have those space in your face mask. That's got to help a ton.
It helps until you make direct contact with one or something like that, or get your hand pinched from a face mask to a face mask or a face mask to a shoulder pad and your hands in the middle of it. There's no avoiding it. Unfortunately, it's just an occupational hazard. Everybody's kind of got the trademarks of having some screwed up fingers and so I got a couple of those. I got a couple knuckles that are drooped up, and that's just part of the deal, unfortunately.
You saw they took Torrey Holt. Remember Torrey Holt, the Rams receiver, the old Rams receiver? He was doing one of those pregame shows, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. And I heard from somebody, his fingers are so jacked up, they go in different directions. And it was distracting to the audience. When he would bring his hand up and the fingers were going in different directions, it got to the point where we couldn't have him on camera.
Yeah, so him, I don't know if you know the name Brian Baldinger at all. He's in the media.
Yeah, Brian Baldy, the offensive lineman for the Cardinals.
So he's in the media quite a bit now, and he's got like the permanent like hang loose symbol. His pinky just kind of goes that way, and so everybody kind of freaks out when they see it for the first time or shake his hand for the first time. So there's a couple famous ones. There's a couple famous, everybody's got their scars and their war stories and all that kind of stuff. So playing offensive line certainly is no exception.
Did you start off there when you were a kid? I saw a picture of your high school when you were in high school. My goodness, you were a tall, skinny thing.
I had to put a lot of work in to get bigger. But I played offensive line on and off for my whole career. And then when I got to high school, I played a lot of tight end, fullback, and then DN, linebacker, those kinds of things. We just really kind of found ways to help the team win. So it was a lot of fun being able to play a lot of different positions. I was our emergency 2-minute quarterback because I could sling it a little bit. So I got to do a lot of fun things in high school, but I always knew I was going to be playing offensive line because as soon as schools started recruiting me, that's what they told me I was going to be playing.
Oh man, is there a worse position in football than fullback?
Well, at least our fullback gets the reward of at least catching a couple touchdowns or running a couple in. We were actually joking on a bus one time. I think it was during the World Series this year in October, and or the playoffs or something. And Jacob deGrom, who's the Mets ace, right? He come back from his injury, and he had hit like 102, 103, then a cutter at like 94. And you're like, we were all kind of just playing the woulda, coulda, shoulda game. And it's like, man, could you imagine like being able to do that on command and throw a ball like that? And everybody's like, oh yeah. And then I kind of made the joke. I was like, you think they're sitting on a baseball bus saying, man, how cool would it be to be an offensive lineman? You know, I don't think those dreams ever happen. Offensive line is just kind of something that happens to you more than anything. And it's a fun ride, and it's certainly a position that is thankless and criticized more than it's played, or more than it's praised. But it's a fun one nonetheless. But I would say probably I don't think anybody wants to be an offensive lineman.
You know, yeah. When I was growing up, I mean, none of us ever sat back and said, "Hey, I'm going to be Anthony Munoz."
No doubt.
You know,
that's until you've already been told that's what you're going to be. You know, and so you try the best of it.
And you see it from the trenches, right? I mean, the level of sportsmanship. As I told a buddy of mine, I said, I'd be willing to bet, and he was at the time was in his 20s or 30s. I said, I'd be willing to bet you could not outrun an NFL offensive lineman. You like to think you could, but you can't.
No doubt. It is funny. You know, I think people fall asleep as to the kind of athletes that are truly out on the field, right? You know, and when you watch things on TV and you compare offensive linemen to the other NFL positions, of course, we're going to look slow, you know, but if you put us up against in a foot race against 90% of the population, I'm pretty sure most of us will win. So it's
the speed is crazy. You know, I grew up watching the old school football, right? I remember I was a Saints fan. I remember Billy Kilmer as a halfback. I remember Archie Manning getting drafted, right? And that old school offensive lineman where you were just asked to push forward or fall back. And now, like in the Super Bowl that just passed, they showed that one play where Jason Kelce centers the ball and has to lead the quarterback who's coming in a full sprint. So he has to center the ball and move 3 yards to his left and make a block. And I told my son, I said, do you know how incredibly fast he has to be to do that? You know, it's mind-blowing.
It all happens fast. Now you're talking about one of the most gifted athletes to ever play center, you know, I think. So that's the standard, right? I think Jason's going to go into the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done. But he's truly a gifted mover, and there's a lot of guys like him. And to be able to move like that in space and do the things that you need to do, and on top of it, be physical and finish. And, it's a pretty impressive thing. And it's actually kind of funny. A teammate of mine had a coach, back in some point during his career, and it makes you kind of think about it and how much you have to train to play offensive line. It's the only position in sports where your back is to the ball. It's the only position in any sport where you're not looking at the ball while you're doing your job. And so it's a complete feel thing. It's one of the coolest things because you have to be trained not only by yourself, but there's 5 guys up front. The running back's got to be on point with you. The tight end's got to be on point with you. It's such a team aspect, and it's like a long dance, you know, to get everything right. To be able to make things work the way that you need to make them work. And it takes a lot of work, and it's a cool thing, something to be proud of, to be able to play this position. You know, it's a very, very difficult and unnatural, thing that we do. And so it takes a lot of work and certainly a good athlete in today's game, because the guys on the other side of the ball are as athletic as anybody's ever seen.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing about the defensive line and the offensive line and how it's changed so much. And what I take, one of the things I love about football is Michael Jordan can take over a game. Steph Curry can take over a game. Nolan Ryan, when he's on, doesn't really need anybody but a catcher. Right? I mean, Jacob deGrom, when he's on, doesn't really need anybody but a catcher when he's on. And you can do that. And hockey moves so fluidly, you can still have a couple of guys, all it takes. But for a football play to truly work, it takes a combination of so many things. You know, and you talk about play design. Well, play design's great. But if the guys aren't executing it, I love how they, talk about Kyle Shanahan, the coach, and how he draws up plays, and he does. But it's you guys up front. It starts there. If that dance doesn't work, I don't care who Deebo Samuel is. I don't care who Christian McCaffrey is. I mean, and they're great players. I'm not knocking them. But they would be the first people to say, yeah, if it's not with the guys up front, it doesn't matter what.
No doubt. And it's also the same for us. We wouldn't be doing a good job if those guys weren't doing theirs. It's a really cool. That's why football is the greatest game in the world. It's a team game, and you can't let your brother and your teammate down. And you're 1/11th of an operation, and everybody's job is of the same importance. I know obviously the media can construe certain things, obviously the quarterbacks are the most important and all these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, he's got to hit his read. I got to make my block. They got to run the right route. They got to catch the ball. They got to run and make people miss. And that's the beauty of our sport. It's the ultimate team game. There's no way you can win without the other guy. And you need 11 guys out there to do that. Like you said, you can't have one guy just take over a game. And as close as the Chiefs are to having that one guy with Mahomes right now, he still needs his team to do it right too. And that's the beauty of football.
Well, you think about the evolution of the sport. When I was growing up, a penalty that you never saw called? You just never saw called. Ineligible receiver downfield.
Well, yeah, no doubt.
You never saw it called because the offensive linemen weren't asked to go do blocks 5-7 yards downfield. You guys are such athletes now. I mean, John Hanna went to University of Alabama. I could not tell you what his 40 speed was because they did not measure it back then. They didn't care.
No, there's no point, right? Yeah, the evolution of offense and the way football has evolved to allow people to play in space and be athletes and expose, and utilize the traits of these guys as athletes. It's really, really cool. And it also is probably a little bit easier on the body than back then because you were just ramming through your head through a brick wall back then. There wasn't much finesse to what happened in football, but it's a beautiful sport. It's the best game in the world, in my opinion. And it's because of all those reasons.
Well, and I'm so glad that they have changed so many things on football. The football that I grew up watching is not the football I see today. And I say that as a compliment, right? I mean, I say that as a big thing. Back in the day, I mean, Deacon Jones literally would tape up his hands like boxing gloves and hit people on the side of the head, offensive linemen, purposefully trying to give them a concussion. And that was okay. Today, it'd get you arrested.
Yeah. All those rules have, to me, anybody who bitches and moans about, this game's getting soft and all that kind of stuff. Well, no, it just makes you have to be more skilled. Like you can't just be bigger, faster, and stronger than the other guy and beat him up as hard as you can and win. And that's not how you win anymore. You can't do that. And guys are way too good and guys are way too athletic and way too strong. And everybody's kind of got a level playing field now where you have to be so much more skilled to be able to play our game because you can't just rely on knocking somebody out or doing those things. And it's good for the game. Obviously, it's good, for the health of the players, but it also weeds out the guys that can't play. And that's the beauty of the way the game is evolving. It's so much more skill based than it is, bigger, faster, stronger based.
Well, and you see that in all sports. You don't see the goons in hockey. You don't see I'm just going to use his name because it's off the top of my head. You don't see the Bill Lambiers in basketball anymore, whose job it was to just kind of
Jordan
hurt people.
Rules aren't existing anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so you can't just sit back and beat because it's the artistry of the game that you truly want to see. That's the joy of it. When did you realize that you were the next level player? And I know I'm putting you on the spot and making you, kind of humble brag. And I don't mean to do that, but you understand where I'm trying to say it. At some point, as my kids, I have an 11 and a 13-year-old, and they play sports. And you see these kids and you see the kids they play against. Every now and then you'll see a kid that you go, well, that's different. That kid's up. At what age did you start realizing I'm a little bit better than everybody else? Not that you would say it, but at some point you had to realize
I knew that in grade school. Obviously I was bigger. I graduated 8th grade at almost 6'5". So I was like basketball, and I was still a good athlete. And it wasn't just me being big and lanky. Like I could do a lot of different things. And I realized that I had a different standard of how I wanted to play then. And it made me believe in myself going forward that I can always be that guy, and, at each step, you kind of get that confirmation. When it was grade school, it became, I can play in high school, right? I'm going to start as a freshman. I'm going to do this. And so got to high school and I started both ways on varsity as a freshman, both as a tight end and a defensive end. And then it becomes, okay, I want to be a Division I football player. And then you work as hard as you can. And then all of a sudden you see the fruits of that labor come in and you start getting, big time scholarship offers and schools start recruiting you. And it's a really cool thing to have head coaches of big time programs walking through your high school to shake your hand, and all your buddies are sitting around all googly eyed because, Brian Kelly or Nick Saban or Brett Bielema or all these guys were just walking through my school's hallway just to say hello and to talk to me for, the 30 minutes that they were on campus and stuff. And so you start to realize that, all right, I'm a little bit different now again. Right. And I know, so I got to keep, but all that did was just keep getting me hungrier in a way. Like I was like, okay, I love this. I love being the best. That's when you kind of fall in love with that, that chase for being the best and wanting to continue to be the best. And so once I confirmed that, and then it's like, okay, now the next question, now can I play at the world stage? Can I be the best college football? Can I be the best in college? And if I'm the best in college, that means I'm playing on Sundays. And, I probably realized that I was going to be an NFL football player by, probably my junior year of college. I had just finished starting my first full season at Notre Dame. And, I was an All-American and all those things. And, agents start calling you. They're like, hey man, you're on every draft board, you're on all these things. And then 2 years later, I was, fortunately picked very highly for, the 49ers. And so it was never one moment of, oh, I know of course, in 8th grade, I didn't know I was going to be an NFL football player. I knew I was going to work my ass off to try to be. But each step of the way, you kind of just get to a goal. Okay, got there. Now where's the next step? And that's kind of the tough part about when you get to the NFL, because your dream stops, right? Your dream stops at some point. And the dream becomes, okay, my dream forever was I wanted to be a first round, all throughout college, I wanted to be a first round pick. I wanted to be an All-American. I wanted to be a captain. So I did all those things. And then once you accomplish it, you're like, oh, wait, there's still more, right? There's still trying, like the process of getting better each and every day becomes so much more evident when you're at the pros, that it becomes you versus you. And that's when it becomes, all right, I'm not worried about, being above, or when I've already made it. Now, how do I make it the best opportunity that I could possibly have? And so that's kind of the process that I've been on. And at no point did I ever think, man, I'm going to be an NFL football player before I was actually an NFL football player, but it was the dreams of and the process along the way that kind of makes you realize I can do this, and everything that I've ever worked for is right in front of me, and I got to keep working to go take it. And that's how it's always been.
You realize, as you said, to use your word, the hunger, you realize that stops for the majority of elite players, right? I mean, kids are in high school think, man, and I get signed by Notre Dame or Alabama, and there's that group that just falls off. Or then there's the group who makes it to the pros, and then they're thinking, and again, I'm just going to use names because they're prime examples, the DeMarcus Russells of the world. I'm here. I got my money. I got my paycheck. And that's all I got to do is just show up, and it's a rare thing for when you get to that highest level, as you said. I think it's such a great point that then you sit back and go, now I've got to be better than every year, because to me, it seems like, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, it seems like the goal would be the second contract and then the third contract. Right. I mean, that because now you're talking the financial responsibilities and you're getting ready to you're not married yet, right? You guys haven't planned that wedding.
We're getting married this summer. Yeah.
So, okay. So now you're getting ready to add a whole thing to it and you start realizing, okay, this is the family thing. And a lot of guys, for better or worse, don't have that hunger that keeps pushing them. That for you, it's the best. If you take care, I always tell my wife, it's my attitude of how I take care of things. I do 100% today. I don't worry about tomorrow because if I take 100% today, somehow tomorrow tends to take care of itself.
No doubt.
Right. And to have that when you add that into a sports thing and also realize the competition of, you know what? They drafted somebody to replace Joe Montana. They drafted somebody to replace Jerry Rice or even Michael Jordan. At some point, everybody gets their replacement brought in while you're there, which is it's got to be the weirdest feeling.
It is. But at the same time, right? Like the motivation, if it can't be the money, right? Because the money's there, right? And I've been very fortunate. So far in my career, yes, I'm about a couple weeks away from the opportunity to earn a second contract, and I've earned the opportunity to go into free agency, which is a huge deal. Not a lot of guys get. I beat the odds in that regard, but obviously those things are nice, and financial security is nice, and for my wife and our future children and my mom and dad and my siblings. And I can now help out in any different way, but that's not why I still play the game. I can make money doing something else. I mean, maybe not this kind of money, but I could probably make money. But it truly is about the pride of your work and the pride of, I see guys making Pro Bowls. I see guys making All Pros. I see guys winning Super Bowls. That's the only thing you've ever worked for. And at certain times you realize the money was part of the dream, right? It obviously was always part of like, if I get there, I can take care of it. I can take care of nothing. I don't have to worry about that. It's one, like Forrest Gump says, it's one less thing. Right. And, but it's never been the focal point. And, I've let myself get wrapped up in contract stuff. I've before it should have been. And I've learned from those mistakes, and I've also learned how to play my best football by chasing, the opportunity to be the best at the greatest stage. Like how many people get to say I was the best in the world at what I did, and that the ability to one day sit down and tell my kids, when I'm sure I'll be done playing by the time they're going to be understanding of everything, because I don't. I play a hard position, so I don't think I'll be going until I'm 45 like Tom Brady. So one day being able to tell my kids, your dad was the best in the world at what I did. And I put everything I had into this. And I hope that one day you can take from that example, or my younger brothers. I have a brother that's 15 years old that kind of has the same gift that I did. He's 6'4" at 15, 6'5" at 15. He's a freshman in my old high school. He's not an O-lineman body, but he's got the opportunity to be a starting quarterback. And I hope, he can look at me and say, my brother is the perfect example of how to get things done and how to do it the right way. And the ultimate goal isn't looking good on Instagram like these kids worry about. I didn't worry about that when I was in high school, but it's a different generation, right? It's not about the scholarship offer. It's not about all those. Obviously, those things are fruits of the labor that you put in. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is winning and being the best at what you do. And you take examples from Tom Brady, from Michael Jordan, from Tiger Woods, the guys that those guys they've made personal mistakes along the way because they've sacrificed so much, because the most important thing was being the best. And that's the coolest thing in the world to me. And I think, I haven't got, I haven't gotten there yet. I think I'm pretty close. I'm right. I'm scratching the surface of where I can go. I'm just getting started, and to be able to build on the success that I had this year individually to hopefully one day achieve those dreams is all I keep working for.
You brought up Tom Brady. Can you explain to me from the athlete's perspective, why do you think he kept at it for so long? I mean, just you from the athletic perspective, because he's had all the accolades he could do. I mean, there's not much more you could add to it. He had a $375 million contract waiting for him at Fox. He's got his brands. I mean, so money is no longer a motivator.
Money was never the motivator. The motivator for him was I was picked. There was 12 guys picked before me, and I'm going to show every single one of these freaking teams that they made a mistake. And it's been that chip on his shoulder for as long as he's played. And once he got his opportunity, he ran with it. And he said, I'm never giving this up. This is my job. This is what I was born to do. And what's his most famous quote is, "Hey, Tom, which ring's your favorite? Which win's your favorite? The next one." And it's because it's all about his life has been so dedicated to this process and just never getting off the game. The goal isn't sometimes always to win. The goal is to keep playing, right? It's just to keep going and to keep chasing being better. And he knows, and him, Michael, like those guys that, accomplished it all. There's nothing more that they could possibly accomplish. And he's still finding ways to be motivated to get better. And that's I think that should be the prime example to any athlete ever trying to make it in this league or any league professionally is, the motivation has to come from inside and it has to come from something that bothers you. And Tom, it bothered him that he wasn't at the mountaintop. And once he got there, he was the best ever at staying there. And so was Michael. And that's why they always say it's harder to stay at the top of the mountain than it is to get there. And those guys, Tom for 20 years stayed at the top of the mountain. And that's why he's the prime example of probably one of the greatest athletes to ever live, is because of that.
That is such an excellent point, because you and I had a chance to play golf with Mike McGlinchey. And can I tell you this? He hits the ball a long way, but he's supposed to. Look at it. And he's got a swing that'll just make your heart bleed. But you and I were talking, and I said, when it comes to the GOAT, right? My thing was Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of his generation, because the game that Johnny Unitas played was totally different than the game Joe Montana played, which was totally different than the game, pick a thing that they play now. But the one thing that is not it's indisputable, whichever way you say that, is what you just said. He was the greatest of all time at staying on top of the mountain. That's such a great quote.
Well, it's true. And I, you can, the Last Dance, I get a lot. I oftentimes that documentary I watch a lot before games and stuff to get, fired up. And there was one of the reporters that was interviewed for that. He always said Michael would find these little things that would just get him right to the right place to stay interested and to stay as a killer. And Tom did the same thing. And I think I saw a couple of weeks ago, Julian Edelman was getting interviewed, who was a longtime teammate of Tom and probably will be interviewed forever on the greatness of Tom Brady. Is one of those things where he was part of the guys that helped him have success. But, after they won their fourth Super Bowl or fifth Super Bowl, and Julian said, "Dude, you did it. You're the best." He's like, "I'm not going for Montana. I'm going for Jordan." He said, I'm going to try and be the greatest team sport athlete that's ever played ever, anything. I don't care what sport it is. I'm the greatest champion of all time. And that's what Tom is. And he's made a lot of sacrifices to make sure that happened for him. Everybody's got to be willing to do what it takes to get to him. And he set the standard, and maybe Mahomes catches him someday, but he's got a long way to go.
Well, he's off to a heck of a good start. I mean, and that kid, I mean, he's one of the few players that when he hurt his foot in the Super Bowl, I mean, everybody in our house was like, we didn't have a rooting interest because whatever. And so it's great seeing that, but nobody wants to see Mahomes hurt. No. Nobody, because the game is better when he's playing.
He's a generational type player, and pretty wild that, my career is going to probably coincide with his. Not obviously nobody's going to be comparing Mike McGlinchey to Patrick Mahomes, but he was drafted the year before I was. And so we got our, the league that I know has always had Patrick Mahomes in it. And so far, and he is as talented I think there's a little bit of a difference there. I mean, I'm sure he is a fierce competitor. His ankle was really screwed up in the Super Bowl and he was scrambling for yards. And so he's a fierce competitor and he's an extreme, but he might be better than Brady because of the talent that he has. I mean, his ability, he might be one of the greatest throwers of the football to ever live. His arm is different. His feet are different. His playmaking ability is different. And he finds ways to win games. So we'll see. I mean, he's only 27 or 8 or something like that. So he's probably got another 15 years to make it work. So he's got and I don't see the Chiefs going anywhere. So we'll see how it goes.
I think he's one of the most creative people to ever play quarterback. They hear about it. You and I play golf, and people that were creative with their short games. What made Phil Mickelson? He would see a shot nobody else would see, right? And to me, that's Mahomes playing football. He will see a pass or a place or something that nobody rightly would go, I'm just going to stop and real quick dump it over, or your shovel pass, or, a little underhanded thing. I'd never seen it. I've been watching football a long time, as we started off by saying. I have never seen anybody play the position with so much creativity.
Totally. Creativity and a competitive spirit, and that's where his success is made. And he has a great coach, and the two of them work well together to let his talent shine and let him do what he wants to do. And that's why they're, 5 straight years in the AFC Championship with 2 Super Bowl wins to go back at it. It's going to be hard. The league's going to have to work really hard over the next 10 years to keep him off the Super Bowl stand.
Take a quick break. I'm going to come back. I know you don't have a lot of time, but I'm just enjoying this conversation so dang much with Mike McGlinchey. We'll be right back after this.
It's time to think differently when it comes to your parties, meetings, and groups. The catering from Havana Cuba Restaurant in downtown San Jose. Instead of the same old, how about the most delicious Cuban sandwich you've ever had? You're tired of fries? Plantains, my friends, they'll change your world. And here's something you didn't know. Havana Cuba was voted one of the top 10 tamales in the entire South Bay. They have vegan, vegetarian, and gluten-free options, and their website is 998cuba.com. They're located at 387 South 1st Street in downtown San Jose. It's Havana Cuba.
So when it comes to seeing all of the stuff, and you talked about The Last Dance, the one thing that The Last Dance, when I watch, I walk away thinking Michael Jordan's competitive spirit made him Michael Jordan. But I think it cost him a lot, because here he is, a 60-year-old man, and he can't turn it off. He cannot turn it off. He cannot not want to beat you. He cannot. And he's still angry. He's still bringing it up. And I think that's why people are drawn toward Brady and toward Mahomes as he goes through this journey. I think Brady has that fire, but he doesn't have the bitterness.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Tom he's a very gracious competitor. I watched him play this year at our place, and we beat them pretty good. And, there was a line of teammates of mine waiting to shake his hand after the game, because you're playing against the guy that's the greatest ever. And everybody knows it. It's a really cool thing, to have the opportunity to have shared the field with Tom Brady. It's nuts. And he's a great ambassador, for our game. He's a great, leader from everybody that I've ever talked to. and he was a great teammate. And you can't really say that about a lot of guys with his stature. And he was a young kid from Notre Dame. He was a freshman when I was a senior, got drafted to play O-line for the Bucs. And, obviously when he's there, I looked after the kid while I was in Notre Dame. He's become a close friend. What's it like? What's it like playing with Tom? He's like, dude, he's like one of the coolest guys ever. Like he's very accessible. He's always around. He's anything. He works to help young guys out. And I think that's lost a lot on people, especially people of his stature. From what I've heard, every coach that's ever worked with him, every guy that's ever talked to him, everybody has the same, glowing remarks, which I think is even cooler than in my opinion, I think that's even cooler than the Super Bowls. To have 20 some years of sharing locker rooms with everybody, and there isn't one guy that could ever say a bad word about you because of how you treat people. That's the coolest thing in the world to me, because my grandfather always said you're a great teammate first, and that's the most important thing. And I've always tried to live like that, and obviously he's tried to live like that as well, which is really, really cool and a really good example for the young guys trying to make it in our game.
What do you think? And you may know because you had the conversation. What was Brock Purdy feeling when he walked up at the end of the game to shake Tom Brady's hand?
I imagine it felt pretty cool.
Surreal.
He's the only rookie quarterback that's ever started a game to beat Tom, ever. That's cool as hell. Like that has to feel really, really special. It's really funny. Brock kind of fell into his situation the way that Tom did, in a way. And, Brock might have an opportunity to never let it go again. And so it could be a kind of a very similar career path. Brock was the last pick of the draft. And, Brock's parents and his family had bought tickets to a couple games because they had to travel for a while. But one of the games they booked tickets for was the Bucs, because they just wanted to come see Tom Brady, let alone it was Brock going to be making his first start ever against, and Brock's now playing against him. And not only does he play against him, but he beats the shit out of him. And it was unbelievable. And, to have won that game like 35-7 or 42-7 or whatever the hell we won it by, I can't imagine what it felt like to shake Tom's hand. He probably reverted back to, man, this is Tom Brady. But Tom was probably like, man, you just kicked my ass.
And Tom would have said that. I mean, Tom would have said that. He's so cool that he would certainly. Matter of fact, I heard an interview with him where he talked about when he left the game, because his parents had come down from San Mateo to see it, and he goes, he was shocked that they're still there because he thought they would have left at halftime. I'm like, really? Really? Do you think that? When Brock Purdy, my wife went to Iowa State, so we watched every Iowa State game. So when Brock came in, my son looks over at me and he goes, Dad, it's Brock Purdy. And I looked at him and I said, you may be the only kid in California who knows who the hell he is.
Everybody. Yeah.
And watching this, I mean, because I have to ask, what did you guys think? What did you guys see in practice? I mean, were you like, this kid is something, or you're like, oh, Jimmy, don't get hurt. Don't get hurt.
We definitely saw some great stuff. And even in preseason, he was a baller. That was why he, was on our team to begin with. I mean, we had another quarterback that was, given a good chunk of change for a backup quarterback role that he beat out straight up. And there was a reason he was one of the guys on our roster. And then you kind of play against him all year and he does a great job. And you're like, okay, whatever. And then, we'll see what he has in the future. And then all of a sudden Jimmy gets hurt and you're like, oh, shit, what's going to happen? And then he comes in and lights it up in the 3 quarters he had to play against the Dolphins. And we're like, okay, we just beat a playoff caliber team handily with this guy. Let's see what he can do next week. And then the next week we balled out against Tampa. And it was like, okay, we're real. He's the real, this isn't a fluke anymore. Like, this guy's the real deal. And so you kind of get that more and more of this faith in him and faith in the team because of the swagger that he plays with. He played with unbelievable confidence. He's, but also at the same time, incredibly humble, to understand he doesn't have all the answers, and he has a coach that probably has 99.9% of the answers. And so you got to trust the people around you. And he did just that. And, very unfortunate that he had gotten hurt in the 5th play of the game, because he might have been hoisting up a trophy if he was healthy. It's really hard for us to swallow that loss because of that, because it didn't seem like a fair shake. It just was really, really unlucky that, in the 5th or 6th play of the game, your starting quarterback goes down for the 3rd time in the season. And then
that's got to be, it had to be crushing. I mean, we've all seen the sideline stuff, and we know as fans, it was just crushing, that you're like, oh man, not again. And especially for this kid and for this team, because everybody knew it was going to be one of those games that, man, this is going to go down to the wire, because these are just two teams that can play. But the same thing would have happened if Jalen Hurts would have went down. No disrespect to Gardner Minshew, but he ain't Jalen Hurts. He played 2 games and they lost promptly.
Right.
2 games.
Yeah. It's really hard to, when things like that happen. I think we would have even had a shot if we just could have kept our 4th string healthy too. So Josh Johnson comes in the 2nd quarter, and he goes out with a horrible concussion. And it's just like, what are we supposed to do here? And so you kind of realize that the game was over, after the 3rd quarter. The 3rd quarter starts, and we're like, I think we were down a score or 2, and we realized that we have no ability to throw the football for the rest of the game. And that makes it really hard to win against the number 1 seed in the NFL. So, it is what it is. It wasn't the best feeling, but the Eagles deserved it. They had a great year, and they have a lot of individuals that are really easy to root for on that team as well. So it didn't bother me as I mean, obviously it still hurts, but it didn't make. Who knows what would have happened if he was healthy? We all like to say, oh, we would have blown them out or whatever. Who knows, right? But we would have loved to have just at least had a fair shake.
Yeah, as a Tide fan, I'm pulling for Jalen and Devontae Smith, but how can you not like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce?
Right.
I mean, and the rest of that group. I mean, they're just, and it's always fun watching teams that become. You overuse the term dynasty, but they are the preeminent team of their era in the AFC.
I mean, it'd be hard. I mean, I know the dynasty thing is like 3 out of 4 is the rule or whatever, but I'd be hard pressed to find. I think 2 out of 5 is pretty good too, especially when you're not only are you 2 out of 5, but you're also one of the last 3 teams standing every single year. So everybody knows it comes through them, whether you get the win or not. It's going to be hard to find teams that are going to be able to knock Kansas City off consistently over the next 10 years because of who they have at quarterback and who their head coach is. I mean, I don't know. It's going to have. I think it's time that we start talking about Andy Reid as one of the greatest coaches of all time.
Took 2 different teams to the Super Bowl, and it's
24 straight years as a head coach, and I think over 16 playoff appearances, which is just insane. 2 Super Bowl wins and countless.
Well, and you saw how wide open Kadarius Toney was and Sky Moore was, and that's all coaching. That is all. I drew up a play where the defense had no idea where anybody was going. I mean, when you're that wide open in the NFL, if what I do. If you've got that much space, 2 to 3 feet in the NFL, that's considered open. When somebody's not anywhere near you, that is an offensive coordinator going.
No doubt. It was an impressively called second half for sure.
What made you, just to go back in time a little bit, what made you in all those colleges what made you go Notre Dame?
I grew up dreaming of going to Notre Dame from when I was a kid. Yeah, I was an Irish Catholic kid in Philadelphia, and we either rooted for Penn State or Notre Dame. And my last name's McGlinchey, so I was rooting for Notre Dame. My first ringtone when I got my first phone was the Notre Dame fight song. I've loved that school since I was a kid, and it was always the school that I wanted to go to. And when they came calling, it was the one I was waiting for. And when they called and offered, and I went out to visit, and I committed on the spot.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brian Kelly going to LSU, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, the head coach.
Marcus Freeman.
Marcus Freeman, and how much his players loved it when they announced he was going to be the coach. I mean, that was one of the truly uplifting things you've ever seen, to watch that locker room just go.
Totally. It was an awesome scene for them. It was obviously clearly the right decision for Notre Dame and Notre Dame football. Hopefully he can keep building his own program that has sustained success. Coach Kelly did a great job of getting us to be back to a nationally contending team. And Marcus has to continue on that legacy. And he's got a great opportunity to do so. He's got a very talented staff with him. He understands the urgency to recruit. And it's a harder game to recruit than any other school in the country. And because the standard is championships, but you also have to have the standard of, 35 on your ACT. So it's a little bit of a weird balance. But it's something that he understands, and he wants the challenge, and he's excited to do that.
See, I told you this, and I told you this the day we played golf. I think you have a career after football in broadcasting because you're just so darn well spoken. And that's why I'm just jumping on this, because I love having you say this, because you think things through. That quote about Tom Brady, I'm telling you, that's just brilliant. But can you explain to me what you see as the biggest difference between a college coach, a Brian Kelly, and an Andy Reid or a Kyle Shanahan? Where does that, because, Saban tried pro, not so much, right? But in college, he's the preeminent force in college football. What do you see as a difference now that you've sampled both sides?
Yeah, I think it's so much more about the game in the NFL. Like, it's so much more about preparation, understanding football, understanding matchups, understanding the traits and evaluations of players, of how they fit into what you want to do. It's so much more about X's and O's and all that. Whereas the college coaches, the best ones should probably be Fortune 500 CEOs, right? Like it's how you recruit. One, if you get better players, you're probably going to win, right? And so if you recruit the right kids, but you call it evaluation of talent, but is it really, or is it just that or you just get the best kids in the country because there's 4 schools that are competing at the top of the recruiting charts every year. And it's Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State probably, right? Or maybe A&M floats in there. Notre Dame occasionally floats in there, but it's those 4 schools, and they just get the best kids. So they're not really even evaluating anything. They're just kind of taking what's the best. And as long as you can be a good salesman and run an operation and understand how to do that. I'm not saying college coaches don't understand X's and O's. I'm not saying that at all, but it's so much more prevalent to understand football, to be able to call a game, to be able to, replace talent and who to sign and who not to sign, where to take your risks and all that kind of stuff, than it is in college. Because college, if you have better players, you're going to win. And if you can run your program to be a desirable place to go to school, and you consistently show that you can win, you're going to have success. So I think you're a little bit more of a natural football coach in the NFL as a head coach, and have to understand that. Whereas in the college ranks, I think you have to really be a program builder. You have to understand how to operate a business in a way, and how to surround yourself with good coaches, how to surround yourself with good support staff, and how to recruit. And you better have a damn good strength coach too in college.
The strength coach is everything, right? I mean, everybody, when they leave, they take a strength coach with them. I mean, that's it. That is the position that, again, nobody ever talked about the strength coach when I was growing up. But now when you see these guys, they leave and the first person they pull is that strength coach.
Totally. and I think it's the most important hire a college coach can have, because he's the only guy that's allowed to be hands-on with the kids every single day of the year. Every single kid on that team goes through that strength coach, and he's responsible for instilling your entire culture through that team. So when your coaches are out of the building recruiting all winter and all summer, who's there? It's the strength coach. And do the guys buy into him? Does he understand how to keep things in order? Does he understand how to push guys to their limit? And does he understand how to develop talent? And he's got a direct hand in the development of every single player that comes through a college program. And so he's the most influential person that you could have on your staff besides the head coach, in my opinion.
I did not know that the strength coach had that much access. I did not know. To me, the genius of Nick Saban, is I don't know how many programs could go through as many losses of coordinators as they do and still stay relevant. I mean, Kirby Smart's going to have to face that now in Georgia, because people are going to start plucking his coordinators. And that's the difference maker. That I think Saban is brilliant at coaching coaches. I don't think Nick gets out there and shows anybody any blocking schemes or how to turn something, but he coaches coaches.
Totally. And he's a developer of talent, and he's also made it the most desirable place to work in all of college football because of who he is. One, he knows that the University of Alabama is also Nick Saban. And so every time a coordinator gets plucked from him, okay, the next best guy or the best guy in the country is looking for that job. I think it's more valuable. It's basically more valuable to be an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator at the University of Alabama than being a head coach at any other school. And an argument can be made for that. And, but then again, it's also why you can have those successes, because you're a damn good recruiter. You have the right strength coach in the building. Those things Nick never lets that change. He's made one strength coach change in his entire time at Alabama. One. And it's because Kirby offered the guy a coaching job, not just strength coaching. And so he understands that that's important. And then everything else is like, all right, well, I've already got the best players here. Just you coordinators, you just don't screw this up, Yeah.
Are you as intrigued by the Deion Sanders experiment, if you will, to Colorado as I am?
I don't know if it's that much of an experiment anymore. It's kind of the perfect thing for what our world is. He understands that where the attention and spotlight is, that's where the recruits want to be. And that's like, he understands how to use social media, he's always been the inventor of cool, right? Like everything that was always cool, Deion was already on top of, right? And he's the king of swagger. He's the king. That's how he played. He was the best when he played. He was the best, and he's also a good human being. And he understands how, like, not just the flash behind it, but how to work behind it and how to be the best. And so it's like this perfect storm of like the new age culture with old school mentality. And it's very attractive for young kids, because they're going to be in the limelight. They're going to do the things that they all want to do. And he's offering this opportunity, and, he does a great job. And I think, it'll be interesting to see how successful he is in a Power 5 conference now. But the way that he's recruiting, he might take over that damn conference. So we'll see.
Did you respect it from the player's standpoint when he basically told the people who were there, you guys probably aren't going to be on the team?
Well,
I mean, at least, the coach was honest with you, right?
To some extent. I mean, back when I was in college, we weren't employees. We were college kids. And so like when I made a commitment to go to college, I was going to be there. Like you don't get I don't know if I love the idea of having the ability to cut college kids. For some of them just, didn't do anything wrong other than they weren't the coach's recruit that's there currently. So that's a little unfortunate in my opinion, but that's kind of what that's kind of the Pandora's box that's been opened with all this NIL stuff and the transfer portal stuff. College football has free agency now, and that's what it is. And every year after like conference championship week, there's a 2-week window for the transfer portal, and coaches start recruiting there before they start recruiting high school. And it's just like the NFL. They do free agency first, and then they worry about the draft after that. And so that's how that's kind of the Pandora's box that we've fought for as players, to be able to get paid, to be able to have freedom, with our freedom comes their freedom. And the security of being a college kid anymore is not as fun as it was when I was in college.
That is a hell of a good point. I mean, you see Lane Kiffin has signed 3 quarterbacks, and he already has a quarterback. Jackson Dart still is starting quarterback, and he signed 3 starting quarterbacks from other programs. That's got to be a weird locker room.
It's a weird deal. And it's not the same experience as even, I'm only out of college 6 years, but I was right at the kind of start of this stuff to be starting to get talked about. And then it blew open 2-3 years of me being into the NFL. And, college kids have to be careful because you always want this so much to, you want to be able to have the most opportunity to be able to do what you want to do and make money while you're doing it. But that's not the dream, right? The dream isn't college. Mm-hmm. The dream is going to college and having a great time and playing great football and developing into a young man to play in the greatest league that there is on earth, which is the NFL. And I think the line is very blurry right now of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. I think a lot of schools play it differently. There's no real blueprint on how to do it. And I think, I hope that college football didn't bite off more than it can chew, because it's a farm system now, and and they've made it explicitly clear that there's a lot of money involved, and players want the money, which they should have the opportunity. That you shouldn't get in trouble for somebody paying for your dinner, but at the same time, you're also 18 years old and you're signing contracts that you have no idea what the language is, and you have no idea what they're asking you, requiring of you. And it can get taken away based off of performance. That's how jobs work. If you're not performing to where they want you to perform at, you can get cut and you can get fired. And that's the kind of thing that's happening to 18 and 19-year-olds right now. And it's also a little disappointing, to be able to tough it out, and grind through adversity. Kids are going to college anymore, and they leave. If they're not starting in their first year, they leave and they go to a different program. And that's crazy to me. I took me 2.5 to 3 years before I started at Notre Dame, and I'm better for it, and so
Well, now you have universities who are looking at Sonny Dykes and going, well, yeah, our first-year coach should take us to the national championship game. I mean, that's a different thing. We're used to have time to build a program, and you don't get that anymore.
Because you can flip an entire roster in a year now.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing. Well, I'm going to let you go. I've taken so much of your time, but as we record this, you are one of the most desirable free agents. I'm not going to ask you to tell me what's going on in your mind or what you're looking at. What I want to know is, what's it like? I mean, because you've earned this right. You've earned this right, and now you have, honestly, the biggest financial professional decision you've ever faced, and you're going to make it in the next couple of months. I mean, how do you go into the mindset with that?
The same way you do everything else, right? I think it's you evaluate what your options are, and you make the best choice versus what you think you fit into well, where your happiness will be, and first and foremost, how does it affect your family? And I have that now. I'm not just a rogue operation as a 22-year-old coming out of college. I have responsibility. I'm going to get married here in a couple weeks, and all that, and we're going to have to move if it's not in San Francisco. So these are huge life decisions that I'm faced with. But again, it's just, all it is evaluating the situations at everywhere. One, you have to have people interested in you, which fortunately I believe I will.
Yes, you do.
And finding, all right, how do I fit into each situation? What's the money like? What's the culture like? What's the coach like? What's the city like? What's all these kinds of things. And then make your best decision and go with your gut. And that's what I've always done. And, it's a great problem to have, because we're talking about, generational money. And, I've worked a long time to be able to have that opportunity, but, it's weird because I put everything I had into being a 49er, and I hope, I'll have the opportunity to still be a 49er. But if it doesn't work out, I'm going to have to start over again. And it's an exciting, but it's a little, nervous of an opportunity.
You'll still have to come out here to play winter golf, no matter what.
I'll still be living here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be in the Bay Area.
I would love that. And I would, and I told you one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, but I'm not. I'm going to wrap it up because I'm going to try to get you to come back just to talk old school football. Talk about your favorite teams. Let's talk about players. Because I had the best time. Somebody asked me, because they knew I played golf with you, and they're like, what was like? I said, I had the best time talking old school football with him. It was the best part of the whole day.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. An old school soul, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and listen, and I grew up watching and playing, and I didn't play, but I grew up watching the players, and I just had all of my favorites, and I would love to go down the roster with you and find out, who would you take? Would you take this one? Would you take that one? Just to see where you're at, and we'll do that if I can ever con you back into doing another one of these. Mike McGlinchey, you're the best. Thank you, my friend. Good luck to you. Stay healthy.
I appreciate it, man.